It was one of those evenings when the air carried a soft chill, and the sky looked like it was trying to hold back the night for just a few more minutes. The road that ran past the edge of the small town was nearly empty, except for the occasional hum of a car passing by. On the side of that road stood a little wooden house, its paint slightly faded, but it still looked warm and welcoming in the glow of the porch light. That was where an elderly woman named Mrs. Coleman lived. She had lived there for years, long after her husband passed away. Most of the neighbors had moved closer to the city, but she stayed, saying she liked the peace and the sound of the crickets at night. Her days were simple, watering her garden in the morning, sewing during the afternoon, and watching old shows on her tiny TV before bed. She wasn't rich, but she had everything she needed and a heart that was never too tired to help someone in need. That evening, she was sitting by the window, knitting a scarf. The radio was softly playing old country music. She liked keeping it on. The sound made her feel less alone. As she stitched quietly, she noticed something strange, a dim light flickering on the road outside. At first, she thought it was a passing car, but the light stayed in one place, blinking weakly. Curious, she put on her shawl and stepped out onto the porch. The wind brushed against her face, cool and sharp. She could now see the shape of a car parked not too far down the road. Its hazard lights were flashing. She squinted her eyes and noticed a figure standing beside it, pacing slowly. Her heart tugged with concern. Out here, the road was lonely, and few people passed by after dark. Without thinking twice, she picked up her flashlight and walked toward the stranger. As she got closer, the man looked up. He seemed to be in his late 20s or early 30s, with tired eyes and a thin jacket that wasn't warm enough for the night. His car door was open, and there was steam coming from under the hood. He looked embarrassed, like he didn't expect anyone to see him in that situation. "Car trouble?" she asked, her voice calm and kind. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I think the engine overheated. I've been trying to call for help, but there's no signal out here." Mrs. Coleman smiled softly. "There usually isn't. This old road barely gets a bar. You'll have better luck in the morning." The man sighed and rubbed his hands together, trying to keep warm. "I didn't realize how cold it gets here at night." She studied him for a moment. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept properly in days. His clothes were dusty and his shoes were worn out. "Well," she said, "standing out here won't help. Why don't you come to the house and rest a bit? It's warmer inside." He hesitated. "Oh, I don't want to trouble you, ma'am." "Nonsense," she said gently. "You'll catch a cold out here. Come on, son. I'll make some tea." There was something about her tone, firm yet caring, that made it hard to refuse. The man followed her slowly up the gravel path toward her small home. The porch light cast a warm glow as she opened the door. Inside, the smell of cinnamon and old wood greeted him. "Sit down there by the couch," she said, pointing toward the living room. "I'll get the kettle going." He nodded, taking a seat. The house was cozy, filled with old photographs and little handmade crafts on the shelves. A quilt was draped neatly over the armrest, and a small clock ticked quietly on the wall. It felt like stepping back in time, but in a comforting way. Mrs. Coleman returned a few minutes later with a cup of tea and a plate of biscuits. She placed them on the table and smiled. "Here, have something warm." The man took the cup carefully, his hands still shaking from the cold. "Thank you," he said softly. "You didn't have to do all this." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be silly. My husband used to say the same thing. He'd stop for strangers whenever their cars broke down. Said you never know when kindness might come back to you." The man smiled faintly. "He sounds like a good man." "He was," she said, her voice growing softer. "Been gone a few years now, but I like to think he'd still be proud of me for helping folks when I can." They sat in silence for a while, sipping tea. The warmth slowly returned to his fingers, and the exhaustion on his face started to fade. Mrs. Coleman noticed the deep sadness in his eyes, though he tried to hide it. She didn't ask too many questions. She knew when someone needed peace more than conversation. "Where were you headed?" she finally asked. He stared into his cup for a moment. "Just driving. Trying to clear my head." "Been a rough few weeks?" she nodded. "Sometimes a long drive helps, but the road can be cruel at night if you're not careful." He smiled faintly. "I guess I learned that the hard way." When the tea was finished, Mrs. Coleman looked toward the couch. "You must be tired," she said. "Why don't you rest here for the night? The couch isn't fancy, but it's comfortable enough." "I couldn't," he said quickly. "You've already done more than enough." "Son," she said with a gentle but firm tone. "If you keep arguing, I'll start thinking you don't like my hospitality." He chuckled softly. "All right, ma'am. Thank you. I really appreciate it." She went to her bedroom and came back with a pillow and a clean blanket. "Here you go. This pillow has been with me for years, but I promise it's soft." He smiled at her kindness, taking it with both hands. "Thank you, Mrs. Coleman," she said. "And you?" He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Daniel." "Well, Daniel, get some rest. You'll figure things out in the morning. The world always looks a little kinder after sunrise." She turned off the lights, leaving only a small lamp glowing in the corner. Daniel lay down on the couch, the warmth of the blanket wrapping around him. It had been a long time since anyone had shown him such genuine kindness. He stared at the ceiling for a while, thinking about how strange life could be, how a broken car led him to the doorstep of someone who made him feel safe again. Before closing his eyes, he whispered, "Thank you, ma'am. You don't know how much this means." From her room, Mrs. Coleman smiled faintly. "You're welcome, son. Get some sleep." The house grew quiet. Outside, the wind rustled the trees and the sound of distant owls echoed across the fields. It was peaceful, something both of them seemed to need that night. When morning came, the first rays of sunlight peeked through the curtains. The smell of coffee filled the house, and Mrs. Coleman hummed softly as she prepared breakfast. She looked toward the couch but found it empty. The blanket was neatly folded and the pillow rested in its place. Daniel was gone. For a second, she felt a small ache in her chest. Then she noticed something on the table, a folded piece of paper. She opened it slowly. The handwriting was neat but simple. "Thank you for your kindness. I'll never forget it," she smiled, shaking her head gently. "Well, I hope you found what you were looking for," she whispered to herself. She walked to the window and saw the sun rising over the hills, painting the fields gold. It was another quiet morning just like the ones before, yet something about it felt different. She didn't know it yet, but that simple act of kindness, the pillow, the tea, the warmth of her heart was about to change her life forever. For the next few days, Mrs. Coleman went back to her routine. She tended to her garden, fed her chickens, and waved at the mailman as usual. But sometimes when she passed by the couch, she would smile and think of the traveler who'd stopped by her home that cold night. She hoped he was safe wherever he was. But life has a strange way of bringing people back together. What started as a simple gesture of compassion was quietly setting the stage for something far greater, something that would soon turn her quiet little life into a story that no one in that town would ever forget. For a few weeks, life in Mrs. Coleman's small house went back to its usual pace. She tended to her garden, read her books, and sometimes visited the neighbor down the road for a quick chat. The only reminder of the young traveler who had spent the night with her was the small folded note he had left behind, which she had carefully placed on the mantel above the fireplace. It brought her a quiet sense of peace, but she didn't think too much about it. She was used to helping strangers and didn't expect anything in return. She was simply glad that he had found a little warmth during a cold night. However, something strange began happening. At first it was subtle, just an occasional car that drove past her house a little slower than usual, maybe even stopping for a moment. She thought it was nothing more than a coincidence, maybe someone lost or looking for directions. But the cars kept coming. Every day at the same time, the same vehicles would appear. They weren't the kind of cars you'd expect to see on this quiet road. Luxury sedans, dark SUVs, and even a few black vans. At first they would just pass by, but after a while they started to slow down and stop briefly in front of her house. Mrs. Coleman didn't think much of it, though. She assumed the new faces were just visitors passing through, perhaps curious about the old house or wondering if there were any shops nearby. After all, she lived in a peaceful corner of the world, far from the busy streets of the city. She didn't know it yet, but these strange visitors were paying attention to her for a reason, and the man who had once stayed in her home was at the center of it all. One evening, just as Mrs. Coleman finished her dinner and was preparing to settle in with a good book, she heard the familiar sound of a car slowing down outside. She stood up from her chair and peered out the window. There it was again, a sleek black SUV followed by two other cars that parked nearby. She frowned, feeling a little uneasy. It wasn't normal for so many vehicles to be gathered around her house, especially not at this hour. She knew something was off. As she made her way to the door, she felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. When she stepped out onto the porch, the wind was cool and the streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across her yard. She squinted as the car doors opened and several people stepped out. They weren't just any people, they were well-dressed, their clothing neat and professional. But something about their presence made her feel like she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't fully understand. One of them, a man with dark hair and a calm, friendly smile, approached her. "Good evening, ma'am," he said politely. "We're sorry to disturb you." Mrs. Coleman studied him for a moment, her heart beating a little faster. "What's going on? Are you lost or something?" The man smiled again, this time a bit more reassuringly. "No, not lost, but we've been looking for someone. A man who came through here a while ago." Mrs. Coleman raised an eyebrow. "A man? Can't say I know much about anyone, except the ones who stop by for water or directions. Is he a traveler?" "Yes, ma'am. A traveler indeed. He was here just a few weeks ago. Stayed the night." Mrs. Coleman's mind immediately jumped to the young man she had helped. She nodded slowly, her thoughts racing. "I remember him. He was in a bit of a hurry, and his car had broken down. I let him rest for the night." The man in the suit nodded. "That's him. We've been trying to find him ever since." Mrs. Coleman's eyes widened. "Why, is something wrong?" The man hesitated before answering. "No, nothing's wrong. It's just, he's someone very important and he's been looking for you." Mrs. Coleman was taken aback. "Looking for me? Why would anyone be looking for me?" The man smiled again, though this time his expression was more serious. "You see, ma'am, the man you helped isn't just any traveler. Well, let's just say he's someone whose work affects a lot of people, and your kindness made a big impression on him." Before she could say anything more, another man stepped forward from the group, holding a folder in his hand. "We've been following up on some details, and it turns out he's a very influential person. Someone who, frankly, doesn't get to experience kindness like yours very often." Mrs. Coleman stared at them, trying to process what they were saying. "You mean to tell me that the young man I gave a pillow to is some kind of important person?" The man nodded. "Yes, ma'am. He's Daniel Hayes, a philanthropist and businessman. We believe he came here that night because he was looking for something. Peace, comfort. Maybe just a reminder that not everyone in the world is driven by profit and power." Mrs. Coleman's mind was spinning. She had no idea who Daniel Hayes was. To her, he was just a young man who needed rest. But now, standing on her porch surrounded by people in suits, she began to understand that her simple act of kindness had meant more than she could have imagined. "You said he's been looking for me?" she asked, her voice soft. "Why?" "I didn't do anything special." The man shook his head. "It wasn't just about the pillow, ma'am. It was about the way you treated him. He came to you at a low point in his life, and when he left, he felt like someone cared. He spent years helping others, but you gave him something more. Something priceless." Mrs. Coleman stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. "I didn't do anything to deserve all this attention," she muttered. The man smiled gently. "Sometimes, ma'am, kindness is all it takes to change the world." Just then, Daniel Hayes himself stepped out of one of the vehicles. He was dressed in a dark suit, his hair neatly combed, and he looked nothing like the tired young traveler she had helped just a few weeks ago. But when he saw Mrs. Coleman, his eyes softened and a look of recognition washed over his face. "Mrs. Coleman," he said, his voice full of gratitude. "I finally found you." Mrs. Coleman blinked, trying to process everything. "Daniel?" he nodded. "Yes, I've been looking for you for days. I can't thank you enough for what you did for me." She shook her head, still in disbelief. "I don't understand. Why all this? I just gave you a pillow and some tea." Daniel's eyes shone with emotion. "You gave me more than that. You gave me hope, and in a world that's often cold and unforgiving, that's something people like me don't get very often." Mrs. Coleman felt a warmth in her chest, something that made the world seem a little brighter. She had always believed in kindness, but hearing it from him, someone she had never expected to meet again, made her realize just how much impact even the smallest gestures could have. "I didn't know I was doing anything special," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to help." Daniel stepped closer, his expression sincere. "You helped me more than you could ever know, and now it's my turn to help you." Before she could respond, he turned to the group of people with him. "Gentlemen, I think it's time we tell Mrs. Coleman what's next." The men nodded and started to gather around. Mrs. Coleman, still in shock, looked from one person to another, trying to understand what was happening. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a transformation that would change her life forever. Mrs. Coleman stood on the porch, her hands gripping the railing as she tried to make sense of what was happening. The vehicles still lined the road, sleek and shiny, black and silver, each one carefully parked as if part of a plan she didn't understand. Daniel Hayes, the young man she had helped just weeks ago, was now a man of confidence and calm, but the kindness in his eyes was unmistakable. He looked at her, his expression soft yet serious. "Mrs. Coleman," he said, "I wanted to come back sooner, but things have been complicated. I needed to make sure I could do this properly." "Do what?" she asked, though a part of her already guessed. The gentle rhythm of his voice made her feel safe, even though the sight of all these strangers surrounding her home made her heart pound. Daniel gestured toward the vehicles. "You've been receiving attention from my team for days, haven't you?" Mrs. Coleman nodded slowly. "Yes, I noticed cars stopping by, people walking near the yard. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was something wrong, maybe neighbors being curious. But it seemed serious." "It is," Daniel said, his voice steady. "I wanted to make sure you were okay, that no one frightened you." He paused, then added softly, "What you did for me that night, it changed how I see the world. And I want you to know how much it matters to me." Mrs. Coleman looked down at her hands, fiddling with her fingers. She had spent her life helping people quietly, never expecting a reward or recognition. She felt a mix of pride and embarrassment. "I didn't do it for recognition," she said. "I just wanted to help. Anyone would have done the same." Daniel shook his head, smiling faintly. "Not anyone, ma'am. That's the thing. Most people would have ignored me, maybe told me to wait, maybe turned me away. But you offered warmth, kindness, and trust to a stranger. That's rare. That's what made it meaningful." The men in suits behind him nodded silently, respectful of the quiet moment between the two. It was clear that this wasn't about ceremony or publicity. It was personal. Mrs. Coleman felt a lump rise in her throat. She had helped countless people over the years, but she had never been thanked in this way, so deeply and sincerely. Daniel took a step closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I've been searching for you because I wanted to do more than just thank you. I wanted to give back in a way that truly reflects the kindness you showed me." Mrs. Coleman blinked, unsure what to say. I don't need anything. Really, I'm fine. Life is simple here and I like it that way." He smiled, not pushing but determined. "I know, and I promise I'm not here to take away your peace. I just want to make your life a little easier. You deserve it." She didn't know how to respond. She had lived alone for years, never imagining that a single act of compassion could ripple back in such a profound way. Her mind raced, trying to process the sight of all these cars, these people, and the man standing before her, someone who had once been a tired, worn traveler and now seemed like he could command the attention of the world. Before she could speak, one of the men in suits, who appeared to be in charge of the others, stepped forward and spoke with polite firmness. "Mrs. Coleman, we are here to ensure that your home and your comfort are taken care of. Mr. Hayes wants you to know that the generosity you showed him is recognized and appreciated. He wants to invest in your well-being and your safety, and he asked us to coordinate the details." Mrs. Coleman looked at him, her mind spinning. "Invested in me? I don't understand. I didn't do anything to deserve all this." "You did," Daniel said gently. "You reminded me of what real kindness is. That's worth more than anything else in my life." For a moment she simply stared at him. She had expected gratitude, maybe a simple thank you, but not this level of attention. She felt a strange combination of disbelief and humility. Her life had always been quiet, and she had never sought acknowledgement. And yet here she was standing on her porch as the man she had once helped prepared to change the course of her days in ways she could not have imagined. You really think I made a difference?" she asked softly. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "A difference you can't even imagine. You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me that compassion still exists, and that matters. More than anything else, it matters." Mrs. Coleman's eyes filled with tears. She had helped people before, but no one had ever spoken to her like this. The sincerity in his voice, the warmth in his eyes, it touched something deep inside her. She realized that kindness, even when given freely, could create ripples far beyond what she had ever imagined. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Then don't say anything, Daniel replied. Just let this be a moment of understanding. That's enough. At that moment, she felt something shift inside her. The worry, the loneliness, and the quiet routine that had defined her life for so long seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of connection she hadn't felt in years. This stranger, now a man she barely recognized, had brought a new light into her life. And it was more powerful than she could have predicted. The men in suits stepped back, giving them space. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I wanted to leave this with you, Mrs. Coleman. Just a token of my gratitude. Nothing extravagant, just a small acknowledgement of what you did for me. She took the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a simple handwritten note. It didn't contain money or any material gift, just words. Your kindness saved me. I will never forget it. You are remarkable. Mrs. Coleman felt her chest tighten. She had never considered herself remarkable. She had simply acted out of habit, out of the instinct to help someone in need. And yet, these words made her feel seen, appreciated, and valued in a way she had never experienced before. Daniel noticed her expression and smiled softly. I will make sure you know how much you matter, he said. But for now, just know that this isn't the end. You'll see. Mrs. Coleman looked around at the vehicles still parked along the road. The black SUVs, the luxury cars, they no longer felt threatening. Somehow she understood that their presence was not a sign of danger, but a sign of care. They were here to support her, to ensure that what Daniel had promised would be done properly. Daniel, I don't know what to say, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. I've always thought that helping others was just part of life. I never expected all this. That's the beauty of it, Daniel said. Kindness isn't about expecting something in return. It's about what you give, and what you gave, it matters more than you'll ever know. Mrs. Coleman felt tears running down her cheeks. She had lived alone for years, her days quiet and predictable. She had helped travelers, neighbors, and even strangers passing through town, never expecting recognition. And now here she was, standing on her porch as a man she had helped just weeks ago, prepared to show her that even the smallest gesture could have enormous consequences. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen, truly appreciated, and for a moment the quiet house, the empty roads, and the simple life she had always known seemed to expand into something bigger, something connected, meaningful, and full of hope. Thank you, she whispered again, though it felt inadequate. She didn't need gifts or fame, but she realized that this acknowledgement, this recognition of her simple act of kindness, was something she had never experienced before. And it felt good, deeply good. Daniel looked at her, his expression calm and kind. You deserve every bit of it, Mrs. Coleman. You really do. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the fields, Mrs. Coleman realized that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet understand. The quiet world she had known, the simple days and slow nights were being replaced by something larger, brighter, and full of possibility. And it all started with a pillow, a cup of tea, and a moment of genuine kindness that neither she nor Daniel would ever forget. The vehicles remained outside, silently observing, waiting for the next step. And Mrs. Coleman, standing on her porch, realized that sometimes the world has a way of returning kindness in the most unexpected and profound ways. The sun had long set, casting a quiet darkness over the small house. Mrs. Coleman stood at the door, her hands still trembling from the emotions that had flooded her in the last few hours. Daniel Hayes, the man she had helped weeks ago, had come back, bringing with him a group of strangers who had followed him here. She still couldn't fully comprehend everything that was happening, but she had a sense that something important was unfolding around her. Daniel stood on the porch with her, his expression calm but filled with purpose. The vehicles outside were silent now, their engines turned off as if they too were waiting for the next move. The men in suits had stepped back, giving her and Daniel the space they needed. The air was cool, and the night felt still, almost as if the world were holding its breath. After a few moments of quiet, Daniel turned to her. Mrs. Coleman, there's something I need to explain to you, something I've been working on for a while. It's not just about thanking you, though that's a big part of it. It's about what you represent. Mrs. Coleman looked at him, her brow furrowing in confusion. What I represent? She repeated, unsure of what he meant. I'm just an old woman who helps when I can. There's nothing special about that. Daniel shook his head, his eyes soft but determined. That's exactly why you're special. Because despite everything, despite the way the world has changed around us, you still believe in simple kindness. You still believe in people, and that is rare these days. Mrs. Coleman felt a warm flush spread across her cheeks. She had never thought of herself as anything special. To her, helping others was just part of life. You didn't wait for recognition or reward. You just did what you could, when you could. But hearing Daniel speak like this made her feel something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose beyond the ordinary. "But I don't understand," she said quietly. "What does all this mean? All these cars, these people coming to my house. It's overwhelming. I don't need anything from you, Daniel. Really, I'm fine." Daniel looked at her with a mixture of understanding and conviction. "I know you don't need anything, Mrs. Coleman. That's why I want to do this for you. It's not about giving you things. It's about showing you that your actions, your kindness, have far more impact than you realize." He paused for a moment as if carefully choosing his next words. "I run a foundation. It's something I've been working on for years now, a way to help people who might otherwise get overlooked. People like you, who do small things that make a big difference. The foundation focuses on preserving and celebrating the quiet acts of kindness that often go unnoticed." Mrs. Coleman blinked, her mind trying to catch up. "A foundation? But I don't do anything for recognition. I just offer a kind word, a helping hand when I can. I never expected anyone to remember it." Daniel smiled gently. "That's the beauty of it. Most people in the world are focused on the loud gestures, the big donations, the grand acts. But the truth is, those aren't what change the world. What changes the world are the little things. The quiet moments where someone decides to do the right thing, even when no one is watching." Mrs. Coleman couldn't help but feel a swell of pride, though it felt strange to hear her own actions described in such a grand way. She had never thought much about the impact she made on others. But now, standing there with Daniel and his team, it felt as if her life, which had always seemed so ordinary, was being painted in a new light. Daniel continued, his voice filled with passion. "Your kindness that night, Mrs. Coleman, it was a turning point for me. It made me realize that the world needs more people like you, people who still believe in the simple power of helping others. And that's why I've been working on something important, a way to honor that, to make sure people like you aren't forgotten." Mrs. Coleman's heart raced. She had no idea where this conversation was leading, but she could feel the weight of it. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever he was about to say, but a part of her knew that this moment, this evening, would mark a turning point in her life, a shift she couldn't ignore. "Daniel," she said, her voice low but steady, "I've spent my whole life trying to help when I could. I've never asked for anything in return, and I don't want to start now." "I understand," Daniel said, his voice calm and reassuring, "and I'm not here to force you into anything. But I want to help you, Mrs. Coleman, in a way that allows you to keep doing what you do best, to keep helping people, without worrying about the small things, the things that make it hard for you to do what you love." Mrs. Coleman looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "What do you mean? What are you offering?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folder, handing it to her. "This is a proposal for the future. It's an idea I've had for some time. I want to help fund a community center here in this town. Something small but meaningful, a place where people can come to find support, to learn, to help one another. And I want it to be named after you, Mrs. Coleman. The Coleman Center for Kindness." Mrs. Coleman took the folder with trembling hands, unsure of what she was reading. Inside were plans, drawings, and ideas. It was more than she could have ever imagined. A place built in her honor? She wasn't sure she was ready for that kind of recognition. She had never thought of herself as someone worthy of such attention. She had always preferred to stay in the background, helping quietly and unobtrusively. "This is too much," she whispered, her eyes scanning the documents. "I don't need this, Daniel. I just want to help people in my own way." "I know you do," Daniel said softly. "And that's exactly why this is for you. You've spent your life quietly making the world a better place. Now it's time for the world to recognize that. This center will help others see what real kindness looks like, and it will give you the resources to keep doing what you do best, without having to worry about the little things." Mrs. Coleman looked at him, her mind in a whirlwind. A community center? A place for kindness? The idea felt overwhelming. She had never imagined her name would be attached to something like this. It wasn't about fame or recognition for her. It was about the people she helped, the ones who needed a little warmth and care. But as she looked at Daniel, at his sincerity, she realized something. This wasn't just about her. It was about a larger vision, one that could ripple out and touch more lives than she could ever do on her own. She sat down on the porch, the folder still in her hands, her thoughts racing. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, Daniel," she said quietly. "I've lived my life simply. I've never asked for much, and I don't know if I can handle something so big." Daniel sat down next to her, his voice gentle. "You don't have to handle it alone. You'll have my team to help, and we'll support you every step of the way. But this is something you've earned, Mrs. Coleman. You've given so much to others. Now it's time for others to give back." She looked at the folder once more, then back at Daniel. The quiet, simple life she had known was slowly slipping away, replaced by something bigger, more meaningful. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she realized that sometimes the universe had a way of pushing you towards something greater than you could have imagined. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice soft. "But I don't want it to change who I am. I just want to keep helping people in my own way." Daniel smiled, his eyes filled with understanding. "You will, Mrs. Coleman. This is just a way to give you more space to do what you already do best. Help others. You'll always be the person who opened her door to a stranger." And as the night grew darker, Mrs. Coleman sat in silence, the weight of the decision heavy in her heart. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that for the first time in a long while, she was being given a chance to make an even bigger difference in the world. The days that followed were filled with a quiet sense of anticipation for Mrs. Coleman. After Daniel's visit, after the proposal for the community center, she found herself lost in thought more often than not. She had never imagined that something as simple as offering a pillow to a stranger could lead to such a huge change. The idea of the Coleman Center for Kindness seemed almost too much for her to grasp. She had spent her life helping in small, unnoticed ways, never expecting more than a smile or a simple thank you. But now things were different. Her world had expanded, and she had to decide how to move forward. Daniel had given her the time she needed to think, assuring her that no matter what, she could take as long as she wanted to decide. She spent her evenings sitting by the window, watching the world go by, the weight of her decision pressing on her heart. It wasn't about the recognition, she told herself. It was about helping others in a way she never could on her own. But could she really take this leap? Could she give up her quiet life for something so much bigger? Then one morning, as Mrs. Coleman was tending to her garden, she saw a group of workers arriving at the house. There was no fanfare, no loud announcement, just a few trucks pulling into her driveway and a team of people unloading materials. She walked up to the front porch, her heart skipping a beat. Daniel was there, standing with a few of his team members, overseeing the preparations. "Good morning, Mrs. Coleman," Daniel greeted her with a smile. "We're getting started today. The foundation is ready to begin construction on the community center." Mrs. Coleman's heart raced. "I didn't think it would happen so quickly." "Well," Daniel said, "once we knew you were on board, we didn't want to waste any time. This place, your place, will be something that not only brings people together, but also honors the spirit of kindness you've always shown." She stood there for a moment, uncertain, her hands nervously twisting in her apron. The workers began setting up scaffolding and bringing in materials. It felt like everything was moving so fast, too fast for her to keep up with. "Are you sure about this?" she asked him, her voice soft. "I've never done anything like this. It's a big change." "I know it is," Daniel said, stepping closer. "But this is what you've been building all along. One small act of kindness at a time. And now it's time for those small acts to add up to something greater. This center will be a place where people can come to learn, to connect, and to find support. It will be a place just like you, a quiet, unassuming force that makes the world a better place." Mrs. Coleman looked at the workers, who were now talking and moving things around. The sight was overwhelming. But there was something in Daniel's words that made her heart warm. It wasn't about the size of the building, the money, or the plans. It was about the people, and the way they would be able to help one another, just like she had always tried to do. "I suppose I can't stop it now," she said with a small laugh, "and maybe, just maybe, I can help with a little bit more." Daniel smiled, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I knew you'd come around, Mrs. Coleman. Thank you. You're giving people something they need, and you'll be helping more than you realize." For the next few months, Mrs. Coleman found herself balancing her usual quiet routine with the growing bustle of the construction project. The workers were friendly, and they would often stop by her porch to chat during their breaks. She found herself learning about things she had never paid attention to before: building materials, design plans, and the logistics of constructing a community center. But it wasn't just the construction that kept her busy. Daniel had asked her to meet with local leaders to talk about what kind of programs the center would offer. She spent many evenings in her cozy living room, planning ideas for the center, workshops on gardening, free meals for those who couldn't afford them, classes for people of all ages to learn new skills. One afternoon, as she was sitting on her porch, Daniel pulled up in his car, a wide smile on his face. "Mrs. Coleman," he said, stepping out and walking toward her. "The building is almost done." "It's looking great." Mrs. Coleman stood up to greet him. "I can't believe how fast everything is moving. It feels like just yesterday we were talking about it. It's amazing how quickly things can come together when people believe in something," Daniel said. "And people are believing in this center. The community is already excited about what's to come." She felt a warmth in her chest. It was one thing to talk about an idea, but to see it turning into reality, to know that it was something that would help others, she couldn't help but feel proud. The center wasn't just her vision, it was everyone's. It was a place where the small acts of kindness, the ones she had always believed in, could grow and spread. As the weeks passed, the center took shape. The walls went up, the windows were installed, and the final touches were added. Mrs. Coleman often visited the site, watching the progress, offering advice when needed. She spent hours talking to the workers, offering them tea and listening to their stories. The same way she had opened her door to Daniel all those months ago, she opened her heart to the people working on the center. She realized that this was what it was all about, not just giving to others, but connecting with them, sharing moments of kindness, however small. Then one day, the community center was ready for its grand opening. Mrs. Coleman stood at the front door, watching the crowd begin to gather. There were families with children, elderly people, young adults, and everyone in between. The air was filled with the sound of chatter and laughter, the kind of noise that meant something good was happening. Daniel stood beside her, a proud smile on his face. "Are you ready?" he asked her, his voice full of excitement. Mrs. Coleman nodded, her heart racing. "I think so. It's just so overwhelming." "You've done more than you realize," Daniel said. This is your legacy. It's all because of you." She looked out at the crowd. There were people from all walks of life, some she recognized and some she didn't. They were here for the same reason, to be part of something bigger, to find a place where kindness and community could thrive. She had always believed that small gestures could change the world. And now, standing at the entrance of the center, she saw firsthand how one small act of kindness had sparked something much larger than she could have imagined. The ribbon was cut, and the doors opened to reveal the warm, inviting space inside. There were tables filled with donated goods, rooms set up for classes, and spaces for people to gather, share stories, and support each other. It was everything she had hoped for, and more. As the crowd began to explore the center, Mrs. Coleman found herself surrounded by people from all walks of life. They thanked her for the center, for making a difference, for giving them a place where they felt they truly belonged. She smiled and listened, but inside she knew that it wasn't just her, it was all of them. It was the community coming together, helping one another, and making something lasting. The evening grew late, and the crowd began to thin out. Mrs. Coleman sat down in a quiet corner of the center, taking a deep breath. Daniel came over to her, sitting beside her. "You did it, Mrs. Coleman," he said, his voice filled with admiration. She looked at him, a soft smile on her lips. "We did it," she corrected him gently. "This isn't just my dream. It's everyone's." And as she sat there in the center she had helped create, surrounded by the sounds of a community growing stronger, Mrs. Coleman knew that her life had been forever changed. What started with a simple act of kindness, a pillow offered to a tired traveler, had blossomed into something far greater than she could have ever imagined. It was a reminder that even the smallest actions, when done with love and care, could ripple out and touch the lives of many.